I must rise above the flames.
Welcome back, Flick Knaves. I'm Lupinefiasco, this is Daily FaB Gameplay, and today we are playing Cindra, Dracai of Retribution. For anyone who is new to the channel, welcome to the Empire. What we do here is review replays of games I played on the Talishar.net client days or weeks ago, after enough time has passed that I lose my bias and can more objectively judge the quality of my games. I will talk through turn cycles as if I were taking them now, giving my thought process for the lines I would take, and comparing those to the lines I did take at the time of recording. We either learn from my mistakes or reinforce good play patterns with the overall goal of tightening and optimizing our gameplay in the future to take down paper events and walk away with that shiny, shiny cardboard. If you like what you see and would like to try this deck for yourself on Talishar, there is a FaB deck link in the video description below. While you're down there, if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. It is the best free way to support me and to make sure that you see every new episode of Daily FaB Gameplay in your YouTube feed. I also have a Blue Sky, a Discord, and a Patreon, links to which are in the video description. Patrons at the Arc Lightning tier or higher will get access to all of my matchup guides for all of my deck lists forever, including this one. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into the gameplay. Today kicks off me using Yukili Bender's full 80. That deck list, sideboard guide, and even matchup notes can be bought on her Patreon, and a link to it is in the video description below. Super solid 80, clearly it won back-to-back callings, and just is generally very strong, which I'm going to demonstrate here. This game is going to go a lot better than my last Arakni game went that I showed on the channel. So we did lose the die roll, we are going first. We can push a little damage. On turn one, ideally we end up with an arsenal. So I think what I want to do, sequencing-wise, that is just going to let me push some damage with daggers, is to pitch Brand with Cinderclaw to attack with a kunai, follow that kunai with Burning Blade Dance, then play Breaking Point and flick the kunai that I attacked with. I have 3 Draconic Links on the chain, and I get to rebuy that kunai, and then I arsenal Ancestral Empowerment. And what that does is just push at least 1 point of damage, though I'm expecting 2, because I assume that Arakni is not going to block the first kunai. That is generally the right decision, and I think if you are facing down a Cindra in Arakni's position, you also should not attack. Now this I disagree with, and I'm curious to see how I'm going to pilot my way through the rest of this turn. It's possible that what I'm looking to do now is flick knives the first kunai on this chain, play Burning Blade Dance, and then Ancestral Empowerment over the top. Maybe what I'm going to do instead, I assume flick Ancestral here, getting the Burning Blade Dance over the top of blocks is going to let me flick the second kunai so that I can buy both back and deal effectively 4 points of damage. So I do think this line ended up being good. We even throw a Brand with Cinderclaw, why not? We get a Tarantula Toxin out of the Arakni, so I would say this was a good turn cycle. It was a little risky, and I don't like not having Ancestral Empowerment in the arsenal. Now, Breaking Point, great card to have too. Disruptive piece of tech that aggro decks like Arakni Marionette really hate to see, but that empowerment is really helpful for pushing Mask of Momentum triggers over the top of blocks, and I think that's what we value more in this matchup. So unfortunately, we are just going to lose our Breaking Point. Kind of a moot point, really. Can we afford to block this Leave No Witnesses? We can pretty safely put Marionette on fewer attack reactions for contracts than we can a hero like New, because Arakni's pumps all mostly affect cards with stealth, and Leave No Witnesses does not have stealth. So if we were to block this, we can probably be sure that it isn't going to hit. There are no buffs. which means I might actually be looking to block with Ancestral Empowerment and Dragonscaler Flight Path, and then on my turn, I can Kunai, Ravenous Rabble, Lava Burst, or Kunai, Ravenous Rabble, Flick Knives, use my Vest, make a resource, Breaking Point, and I could even Dragonscaler the Breaking Point to play Lava Burst if I wanted to. Without knowing Arakni's deck too well, I feel like I should be okay blocking for 4. Alternatively, we take 4, we lose our arsenal. Now our hand is probably just doing Kunai, Rabble, Lava Burst. And we lose our mark, which is kind of good and bad. So on the one hand, losing our mark says that Arakni doesn't flip. On the other hand, losing our mark means that Arakni stays as Marionette. And the more I'm hearing from Arakni players, the more I'm learning, well, they would honestly just prefer to be Marionette for the duration of the game. Curious to see how I'm going to navigate myself out of this position. I think the Empowerment is a worse card because it only works with our Brand with Cinderclaw, which will not be our Mask of Momentum trigger unless we did something like Ravenous Rabble, flick a Kunai, make a resource, attack with the second Kunai, then attack with Brand, and Arakni only has a 2 block. It really is unlikely. So I think that Kunai, Rabble, use the Vest to Breaking Point is what I'm looking to do, and I'm going to Arsenal that Ancestral Empowerment. It's weird that I chose to prioritize this one over the first one that we saw, but I do like this line, and this is the line that gets us to a Breaking Point. Because we dagger Breaking Point, we get to buy back one of our Kunai after we Flick Knives it. We did just see a Wax On, so regardless of whether this Breaking Point hits, we're not going to break our Flight Path. This is a Mask of Momentum trigger. We're just going to draw into a defense reaction, so we end up taking an intellect penalty if this does connect. The great news is that Arakni is incentivized to not let this connect. So we get the Mask of Deceit, which is huge. Really nice to get that off of the battlefield this early in the game, and especially when Arakni is just choosing to stay as Black Widow. That means that we don't have to deal with Trapdoor coming later in the game and effectively giving Arakni a 5th card. Savor Bloodshed here says that Kiss of Death effectively deals 8 points of damage because of the on-hit, and Arakni will draw a card. Because she is Black Widow, we are assuming that she is just going to discard in order to give this +3 and banish a card on hit. So taking 11 here, and Arakni draws a card to replace the arsenal and then flips back into Marionette. So really nice turn cycle for Arakni. Thinking about what we want to do on our turn, the options look kind of grim. So if we take 11 here, we go to 28, we have to banish a card. Probably Oath of Loyalty. What I might want to do instead is just block with Oath and Dragonfire and then wait for Arakni to discard and play Wax On and cover 11 that way. On our turn, we just play Fire Tenant. We could even Ancestral Empowerment if we wanted to maybe draw into a 0-cost Draconic Attack and get our plus power from Fire Tenant, send something like a 2-card 8. But just kind of a wacky turn cycle. The fact that we don't have fealty and we don't have a brand makes this Oath of Loyalty very difficult to work with. And if we just accept that we take a bunch of damage to Kiss of Death plus Arakni ability, then we don't even have a turn based on that. We banish our Wax On, and our turn doesn't work. We banish Oath of Loyalty, and our turn is like Fire Tenant, pitch Wax On, play Art of Dragon or Fire Tenant, Ancestral Empowerment, hope that we draw into something playable. It just doesn't really work. The whole thing doesn't really work. So we get an Arakni activation, which is nice because we get to play Wax On. Be curious to know what Arakni was thinking throughout this turn cycle because we showed them the Wax On. But they do get to flick a Clave, which means that they will draw a card from the Savor Bloodshed effect. They don't have Go Again, so we don't have to worry about them flicking Kiss of Death. And here, I think what I like is just dealing 3 and passing the turn. I don't like Empowerment here. It's nice if we draw into a Draconic 0 for 3 or 0 for 4, but I wanted that Ancestral Empowerment in the arsenal for the exact same reasons that I wanted it in the arsenal on turn 0. It is better for getting our Mask of Momentum triggers. Now we do have this breaking point, so if we can keep our hand, which seems unlikely, then we can play the breaking point. Do I agree with this block? I do. Arakni has 4 cards in hand. Presumably one of them is a reaction that gets this 2-power Mark of the Black Widow over the top of blocks. So rather than try to block the Mark of the Black Widow and get blown out, let's just let it hit. We're going to lose the card to the banish effect that we would have lost to blocking. See, just a nick, not something that I was going to deal with. We will banish the top card of our deck. Loyalty Beyond the Grave, probably the card we wanted to banish the least, because now we need both of the copies that are still in our deck. What are we going to banish from hand? I think it's just Hot on Their Heels as the card with the lowest upside. If we don't get disrupted anymore, then our turn is Brand with Cinderclaw, display Loyalty, Blaze Headlong, at some point flick a knife, make a resource with Vest, and then play Breaking Point, which is great. If we end up losing a second card, then we have a real question. Kiss of Death is just damage, so we are not blocking this. If Arakni wants to play the Tarantula Toxin, that's fine. We'll take a total of 7 here. There's no Go Again, so there's no flicking Kiss of Death. Our turn is going to be Brand, display, Blaze Headlong. This makes it the most annoying for Arakni to try and block out our damage. I do not want to flick knives here. The Frailty Trap is basically 4 points of value. It gets 3 on the Brand with Cinderclaw, and it's going to take 1 power away from our breaking point. The real downside of the Frailty Trap from Arsenal is that it cleared out Arakni's arsenal, so our breaking point is just damage. But it's 4 damage, it represents a Mask of Momentum trigger. Arakni does not have armor left, so if they did have a defense reaction, I'm assuming it would have been used on the Blaze Headlong. Maybe not, maybe they put us on something like a Lava Burst and we're just expecting to get their value later in the turn, but I am thinking that if they had the defense reaction, they would have played it sooner, so the breaking point either draws a card or gets 2 cards away from Arakni on defense. Now, they did just show us a Command and Conquer, so maybe this draw trigger isn't the greatest thing in the world, but at the same time, we pushed some good damage. Using the flight path here is a good line. I'm glad I thought of it. I would not have taken this line had I not just been shown Command and Conquer. I absolutely would have arsenaled this Hot on Their Heels, but if my Arakni is going to give me free information like that, I'm definitely going to use it. Playing Up Sticks and Run, I assume that we've got a blue pitch, so bringing back Clave, attacking for 9 with Go Again. We are not marked, so the Savor Bloodshed does not have an on-hit, and we know that this last card in Arakni's hand is Command and Conquer. So looking at what we have in hand, I'm suddenly very interested in blocking 7 on this Clave with Loyalty Beyond the Grave and Shelter from the Storm. Additionally, our hand doesn't really convert well outside of this. If we used our Loyalty Beyond the Grave to block the Clave, we could then pitch Shelter to attack with Kunai, follow with Display Loyalty and Blaze Headlong, as well as getting a Flick Knife effect in there. The reason I would block with Loyalty instead of Shelter, despite it blocking for 1 less point of value, is that I want to start getting loyalties into my graveyard. I'll have the 1 in there as soon as I draw the second one. If I can play it and get that into graveyard, now Loyalty Beyond the Grave has an effect, and I value that more than the 1 point of damage from Shelter from the Storm. So we have a few lines, just depending on, do I want to totally block out here, or do I want to try and set up an arsenal? Now, I don't love this line, If I'm blocking for 9 and just sending Blaze headlong, this is very heads up. Really playing around the Command and Conquer. At the same time, my opponent just has Command and Conquer. So, sort of a tricky situation, right? Do I now never Arsenal because I know my opponent has CNC? Do I make them use it? How long can I wait before I need to start trying to set up a larger damage turn? We are 9 points ahead on life, threatening to be up 13. But even so, we do need to eventually win this game, and if Arakni is just going to get to keep 5-card hands with a 2-cost 6-power attack and Arsenal, that is going to be a problem at some point. Drawing into some more gas, we are now very heavily incentivized to start blocking because we know that CNC and Arsenal is going to destroy one of our D-reacts. So Arakni flipping into Tarantula based on our mark. After the Orb Weaver Spinneret, I believe the Chalerica is attacking for 4, representing 5. If we just take the damage, I would like to play Shelter from the Storm here. We can't wax on for its full benefit because the Chalerica is not a 0-cost attack. But if we use our Shelter from the Storm, then we do cover up 4 points of damage. We are insulated against Arakni playing Command and Conquer and then just passing the turn. And maybe I'm thinking, well, if the follow-up to the Chalerica is 4 points of damage, then, or is CNC Arakni IPs themselves, then we can pitch a D-react to Dagger, then Hot on their Heels, then Blaze Headlong, which is threatening lethal damage. Again, I think I would have liked to play the Shelter from the Storm there, but I can see why I'm okay going down to 8, because going down to 7 after Flick Knives, because we are going to threaten lethal. And we get to Arsenal a Wax On, and our Blaze Headlong has Go again. So if we draw into something like Art of Dragon Fire or Breaking Point, we can just fire that off. It's a very aggressive play that we can only really make because we knew that our opponent had Command and Conquer, and I don't even know that I like the play that much, but I can see the reasoning behind it, and it does put us into a very good position. Arakni playing out the Frailty Trap here is kind of interesting because they actually hurt their own Quick Dodge Flexors, and I wonder if it would have been better for them to just take the 1 from Kunai. It does keep our Mask of Momentum trigger alive, whereas using the Flexors on our Dagger does not. At the same time, Arakni doesn't know that. Arakni sees that we have 4 cards in hand. We pitched one of them to attack with a Kunai, but Arakni doesn't know what this Wax On is. Now, maybe their hand is just really bad, but based on them having the defense reactions, I am so happy to just pass the turn. Oh my god, their Flexors blocked for 2, and we got a full card out of it. Just incredible value for us. Codex of Frailty coming down, we'll take the Frailty. We have a defense reaction in Arsenal, so the Frailty really does nothing to us. I shouldn't say it does nothing, because we have an Ignite that would normally pay for a Kunai, but because we are frail, it cannot. Now what we get to do instead is just look to Arsenal the Ignite and sit on it. Arakni's at 8. We're going to be threatening 10 points of damage, and Arakni has no armor. So we will say no blocks. We'll block with our Wax On. Then on my turn, I am looking to Rising Resentment, Brand with Cinder Claw, Ravenous Rabble, flick a Dagger, rebuy the Dagger with my 3 Draconic Links, and be able to either Arsenal the Ignite or play it if I get my draw trigger and rip a 1 cost off the top, or if Arakni just goes down low enough that 2 points of damage is worth more this turn than on my next turn. Just thinking about what my other lines could be. Arakni isn't representing anything more than just 4, so maybe I am thinking about blocking with Brand with Cinderclaw and Ignite, because I get to sit on my Wax On, and maybe it's more relevant on my next turn. Between Rising Resentment and Ravenous Rabble and Flick Knives, I'm still threatening lethal damage. My Arakni has to give me something. And it appears that I have decided that yes, the Wax On in Arsenal is more important than the Ignite in hand, and I love that line. Sitting on the Wax On just really takes away a lot of avenues from which Arakni could get back into this game. The Command and Conquer hoses us, but to be honest, the Command and Conquer hoses us anyway, even if we have the Ignite. But if Arakni's turn is Leave No Witnesses, Persuasive Prognosis, Bonds of Agony, Kiss of Death, anything that they are really just trying to push either vanilla damage or some sort of on-hit, as long as it doesn't say that we can't play defense reactions, we're in a great spot. Revealing Art of Dragon Fire is kind of a shame. We would have loved for our opponent to not know that they are just taking 2 points of damage on their next turn. But our Rabble flips are 4, we know that that's what we have coming up. So our entire game now is just keep 2 cards in hand. One of them being Art of Dragon Fire, the other being something that pitches to play Art of Dragon Fire. The fact that we have Loyalty Beyond the Grave opens up more avenues for defense because we only need to keep 1 card in hand, that being Art of Dragon Fire. We can block with our Loyalty Beyond the Grave, then at the start of our turn banish both copies, draw a new card, and use that to pitch to play Art of Dragon Fire. And if our Arakni does not have Shelter from the Storm, which as of yet they haven't shown us that they play Shelter Beyond the Storm or Shelter from the Storm, then we get to just kill them. So we'll see what our Arakni has coming up right now, representing Mark of the Black Widow for 7. They can flick their Hunter's Clave, mark us. That will put the mark up to 7 power. We have to think about what else they could have in hand. If they have something like Take Up the Mantle, it probably isn't turning the mark into anything that isn't already marked. Maybe they choose Bonds, but they would need a 3rd reaction available to actually get the effect. So just really thinking, okay, this Mark of the Black Widow could be coming in for 9. How am I going to block 9? I can block 9 with Display Loyalty, Loyalty Beyond the Grave, and Wax On from Arsenal. And so I like that play. And if Arakni does have the 3rd reaction, the 2nd reaction in hand, to get Mark of the Black Widow over the top of blocks, then we can banish our Ravenous Rabble to make sure that we keep our Art of Dragon Fire. If we have a Bonds of Agony, let's think. So Bonds would be 4, because I believe it would keep the Orb Weaver Spinneret. It would be 7 from the Take Up the Mantle, and another reaction would make it 10. Then its own effect makes it 13, I think. And we are covering 10 points of damage, so we take 3, lose our Art of Dragonfire because Arakni needs us to lose that, or else they just die. We have still put 2 Loyalty Beyond the Graves into our graveyard, so we get to draw a new card, and then we play Ravenous Rabble something. And I would like to keep Vest here just in case the something that we draw from our loyalty is a 1-cost attack, so that we can Rabble, Flick Knives, use our Vest, play a thing. We put Arakni down to 1, we're threatening 9 points of damage at least. If we just rip another Art of Dragonfire, then we're threatening 11. So we are in a really good spot, which is why I can afford to plan around the worst case scenario. And I think planning around the worst case scenario does say that we don't want to block with Vest. Now I do understand that maybe my thought here is, well, if it's just Mark of the Black Widow for 7, and we cover that with Wax On from Arsenal, now our turn is looking incredible. We just play Ravenous Rabble, get in for 4, go again, flick a dagger. Oh, I hate that. Okay, good. Ravenous Rabble, flick a dagger, get in for 7 with Art of Dragonfire, and we're just really making our opponent have it. Now this, again, I hate, because this is playing around like the super worst case scenario, which I guess is fine. we definitely should not be playing Loyalty Beyond the Grave to cover up the absolute worst case scenario. I think that turn was mismanaged, though ultimately did work out for us. We really are putting our faith in our opponent just not having an answer to Art of Dragonfire. And we'll see if that faith was paid off. If they have Shelter from the Storm, they can discard it in our defense step so that we cannot flick knives in response to it. Alright, well, we got there. So, kind of a deceptively close game. I think Arakni was like one good turn away from being able to take tempo back from us. We were burning through our defense reactions pretty quickly. We were lucky to have found as many as we did as early as we did and have them not seriously impact our turn cycles. That does mean that if Arakni could have just lived for a little longer, suddenly we're having to block Leave No Witnesses and Command and Conquerors, Persuasive Prognoses, and Bonds of Agony with a bunch of 2-block attacks. So this could have gotten bad for us, but we did just have some very good turn cycles, threatening an early breaking point to get Mask of Deceit, which prevented a late game trapdoor flip. Overall, just a well-played game, and we can see the difference of going from my Cindra list to a professionally designed, very strong redline Cindra, which I will be demonstrating for you all later on this week. I hope you enjoyed this game. I hope you learned something. If so, be sure to head jab that like button. My comments are always open for any questions or feedback. If you haven't already done so, please consider a YouTube subscription. It's free. It helps me out a lot. I have a Discord, a Blue Sky, and a Patreon, links to which are in the video description below. Until the next time I see you on Daily FaB Gameplay, take care.